Switching gears, several candidates for Congress have emerged to represent District 15 after Congressman Jose Serrano finishes his term. And while it is early on in the political season with primary elections set in June of 2020, here at Bronx we'd like to introduce the candidates for District 15 to our viewers. We've reached out to all who have officially entered this race and have spoken to candidates Jonathan Ortiz, Thomas Ramos, and Assemblyman Michael Blake. Joining us today to discuss District 15, his candidacy, and issues concerning the district, and more is Councilmember Ritchie Torres.
Welcome. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's an honor to be here.
Yes. So, you know what? I want to get straight to it with the issues that are passionate, that have struck you as something that needs to be done in the Bronx. And one of those issues is housing. And that seems to be the topic for most of the members who have joined the race. Tell us what sets you apart and what you are planning to do to improve housing.
Well, I have been an advocate for affordable housing from the moment I entered public office. And not only have I studied the issues in depth, but I've lived. You know, I grew up in public housing right across the street from Trump Golf Course.
Yeah, that must be very interesting now to go back and see that.
You know, I tell people I've been smelling the stench of Donald Trump well before he became president, but I was living in conditions of mold and mildew and lead with no reliable heat and hot water. And right across the street, as I was living in those conditions, the city was spending more than $100 million on a golf course for Donald Trump. And I remember asking myself at the time, how could it be that we're investing more in a gilded, gated golf course for Donald Trump than in the homes of struggling New Yorkers? And so that's what inspired me first to be a housing organizer and then run for the city council. And for 6 years, I've been the leading advocate for public housing in the city of New York. The South Bronx, which is said to be the poorest in the country, has one of the largest concentrations of public housing, which has been so savagely starved of funding at every level of government that it has $32 billion worth of capital needs. You know, in the private housing sector, you have more than half the residents in a neighborhood like Fordham pay more than half their income toward their rent. And that's before you factor in the cost of healthcare, prescription drugs, food, transportation. So for everyday New Yorkers, our city is becoming increasingly unlivable. You know, we've heard about the term the working poor. We now have the working homeless, right? Half of the people in our shelter system are working people, right? The promise of the American dream is that if you abide by the law and you play by the rules, you will have a fighting chance at a decent life. That is no longer true. And so we need a member of Congress who's going to restore the promise of the American dream.
So what do you think is happening? Because housing has been an ongoing problem for years. Homelessness, even though the numbers seem to be going down, it's still a big issue. What do you think is causing all these issues, and why haven't they been tackled yet?
And the fact is the federal government has left behind the people in the South Bronx, right? Most of the programs affecting housing, whether it's Section 8 or Section 9 public housing or the low-income housing tax credit, are all federal in nature. And so we need to create programs like a tax credit that brings relief to families that pay more than 30% of their income toward their rent. There are families who are living on the edge of homelessness because they can no longer afford to pay their rent, right? Incomes are stagnating and the rent is rising. And I see a bee here.
I was trying not to... trying to sweeten up your comments here. I was trying not to...
It's divine intervention.
Yes, it is. So how do you go about pushing that tax credit to make sure that it passes?
Look, the most important thing to know is the rules are set in Washington, D.C., right? The core issues in the district are health and housing, and most of the policies affecting health and housing are set in Washington, D.C. And so if you want to have an impact in fighting racially concentrated poverty, if you want to have an impact in lifting the lives of working people, you have to be a policymaker in Washington, D.C., because that's where the rules are set.
Now, one of your other goals is to make sure that the Bronx is safe, especially for our youth, for our families. And I'm sure that when you're out in the field, that you're able to connect with those people who may say, you know what, I don't think my vote matters. But how are you ensuring them that, yes, their vote is going to matter and that a difference can be made?
Look, it's not often that you have an open congressional primary. There's an opportunity to elect the next generation of leadership in the Bronx, to have the voters of the Bronx see themselves reflected in their elected officials in Washington, D.C. And I just tell people, if we do nothing, nothing will change. Right? We have to agitate for change. That's the best hope for achieving transformational change in our country.
Now talk about some of the changes that you've made.
Sure. So I have been in the investigations chair for about 2 years. I have actually fought Donald Trump here in New York City. So we conducted an investigation into Kushner Companies, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, who was using illegal construction to harass tenants out of their homes and drive affordable housing units out of existence. And we were able to pass a law that closes the Kushner loopholes, that requires the Department of Buildings to refer landlords like Jared Kushner to the DA's Office for Criminal Prosecution. So if you are weaponizing illegal construction to harass people out of their homes, you can be subject to criminal prosecution because of the law that I passed. I've also had a role in securing billions of dollars in new funding for public housing. So I'm the support of a program that led to $500 million in renovation in a public housing development in Southeast Queens, as well as in the Bronx. So I've been a leader on affordable housing in the city.
And what about when it comes to public schooling, when it comes to public hospitals? These are also issues that you are trying to make sure that our people are getting the most out of everything that they can in their community.
So we need to ensure that public hospitals like Jacobi and Lincoln Hospital receive their fair share of safety net funding. But we also have to ensure that every New Yorker has access to affordable, quality health care. I'm in favor of creating a public option. Medicare should be available to every New Yorker. Right? You should have the ability to choose which insurance you prefer, because that would restore choice and competition in the marketplace. So healthcare should be the highest priority. It's a fourth of the Bronx economy. The largest employer in the Bronx is Montefiore. The largest unionized workforce in the Bronx is 1199. So healthcare is certainly going to be at the center of my platform.
Well, what's the lasting message that you'd like to give to our viewers who are watching here today? Why they should go ahead and vote for Ritchie Torres?
Look, this is going to be a change election. It's going to be a choice between the past and the future, between a reactionary old guard and a new generation of leadership. And I suspect the voters feel, as Albert Einstein did, if you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. And so we have to reject the status quo and elect a new generation of leadership. And there's no one who brings the best combination of change and experience more than I do.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck.
Thank you.
To find out more about Councilmember Ritchie Torres for Congress, visit torres.nyc. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Open right after this.